Imagine standing at the doorway of a tiny stone cottage in the summer of 1764. A mother watches her 14-year-old daughter disappear down a worn dirt path toward the pastures, the same route she's taken 100 times before. Mist hangs low in the valleys of Gévaudan, blurring the hillsides. By nightfall, Jean Chastel will not return. Her body will be found torn apart, throat ripped open, skull shattered like an eggshell, head barely attached by shreds of flesh. The village priest will refuse her last rites, not because of the violence of her death, but because of what claimed her life. Over the next 3 years, something will stalk this isolated province, leaving more than 100 people dead. Veteran wolf hunters, men who'd brought down thousands of predators, will freeze in shock when they finally see it. Musket balls will bounce off its hide. It will rise onto its hind legs and select its prey with a mind that seems to break every natural law. Even after King Louis XV's own gun-bearer kills a supposed culprit and parades the carcass at Versailles, the slaughter won't end. It will intensify, and then a long-buried document will surface. An autopsy report from 1767, revealing human bones inside the creature's stomach, surgical scars etched into its hide, grooves on its neck as if it once wore a heavy collar, and teeth filed into deliberate shapes. This isn't some quaint curiosity tucked into the margins of history books. It's the account of how an entire nation was terrorized by something that, officially, never existed. To understand how it began, we need to return to the summer of 1764, to a remote corner of France on the brink of its darkest nightmare. Gévaudan was no ordinary province. Here, the Middle Ages still clung to the land. Dense forests stretching for miles, dotted with hamlets of 50 or so souls clinging together against the wilderness. There were no real roads, no regular patrols, only shepherds, farmers, and their children eking a living from thin, stony soil while wolves howled from the treeline. France had just limped out of the 7 Years' War, bled dry of money and men. Survivors, often young and alone, spent long days guarding sheep and cattle, perfect prey for whatever hunted those fields. But the locals knew wolves. Every peasant could describe their habits, their weaknesses, and the tricks to drive them off. Wolves were as ordinary as bad weather or failed harvests. So when, in April 1764, a girl tending cows reported an attack by something she said looked like a wolf but wasn't, most shrugged it off. Her herd had driven the creature away. She was shaken and confused. Then came June 30th. Jean Chastell's mutilated body was entered in the parish register with words no priest had ever written before. She had been slain by the ferocious beast. Not a wolf, not a mere animal, the beast, as though there could be only one, as though everyone already knew what the priest meant. Within weeks, killings spread like wildfire. But these weren't ordinary predator wounds. The creature wasn't merely feeding. It was destroying. Corpses were found with heads twisted backward, faces torn away, throats gouged to the bone. A boy who survived one attack described how it seized his companion, placing its paws almost gently on the victim's shoulders before opening jaws impossibly wide and swallowing the boy's entire head. By September, 7 people lay dead. By October, 12. The thing struck in broad daylight, sometimes miles apart on the same day, and seemed to have no fear of humans, no animal caution at all. Children who tried to defend themselves with sticks saw it crouch just out of reach, eyes like burning coals, waiting for one of them to break ranks. Descriptions refused to align with any known species. Witnesses agreed it was as large as a calf or young bull, far bigger than a wolf. Its coat was reddish-brown with a black stripe bristling down its spine like a hyena's mane. The head was massive but wrong, long like a greyhound's, yet with a flat, calf-like snout. The tail was strangest of all, longer than a wolf's, thick as a man's forearm, tipped with a heavy tuft it used to knock grown adults off their feet. What frightened people most was its movement. It could spring 20 feet in a single bound, its hind legs driving it forward with unnatural strength. One shepherd swore he saw it clear a 7-foot stone wall without breaking stride. Another claimed it reared up on its hind legs, perfectly balanced, using its forepaws to toy with a door latch. Captain Jean-Baptiste Duhamel, dispatched to investigate, sent a shaken report to his superiors. Its chest is as broad as a horse's, its body as long as a leopard's, its pelt red with a black stripe. You will surely think, as I do, that this is a monster, its sire a lion, its dam unknown. Panic gripped Gévaudan as word of the killings spread. Farmers abandoned their fields. Children were locked indoors. Markets stood deserted because no one dared to travel. In a province already worn thin by poverty, even the fragile economy began to unravel. Villagers, frantic to end the bloodshed, tried everything they could imagine. Bait laced with poison, pits dug deep into the forest floor, hunts that gathered hundreds of volunteers. None of it mattered. The beast seemed almost human in its cunning, slipping past ambushes, sensing traps, waiting for hunters to be distracted before it struck again. Then an event occurred that transformed a regional terror into a national fixation. On January 12, 1765, 8 children were attacked near the village of Verret. But this time, instead of another massacre, 10-year-old Jacques Portefaix rallied the others into a defensive knot. With nothing more than sharpened sticks, they stood shoulder to shoulder against the monster that had slaughtered grown men. They jabbed at its eyes, struck its muzzle, refused to scatter even as instinct must have screamed at them to run. At last, the creature retreated, bleeding and enraged. News of this improbable stand traveled all the way to Versailles, where Louis XV, keen to deflect attention from France's recent humiliations in war, rewarded the children lavishly. Portefaix was granted 300 livres, roughly a year's wages for a laborer, and the king promised to fund his schooling. More crucially, the crown declared the full might of France would now be bent toward destroying the scourge. Suddenly, Gévaudan teamed with professional hunters, royal soldiers, and men chasing glory. A bounty of 6,000 livres was proclaimed. Papers from Paris to London published breathless updates. The Courrier d'Avignon printed every rumor. British broadsheets mocked France for failing to kill a single animal. Captain Duhamel led great hunting parties, sometimes more than 1,000 men, and in October 1764, they thought the nightmare finished when they cornered the beast at the Château de la Bessère. Musket fire thundered. The creature collapsed. But before their eyes it rose, shook crimson from its coat, and vanished into the forest. Duhamel's report admitted it had taken several balls to its body without serious injury. As failures mounted, Louis XV summoned new specialists. Jean-Charles Marc Denis and his son, famed wolf slayers from Normandy who boasted of 1,200 kills. They arrived with carefully bred hounds and supreme confidence. Yet after 4 months, they produced nothing but the corpses of ordinary wolves. Meanwhile, the predator adapted. Where once it skirted cattle, now it pulled down bulls with ease. It stalked villages in broad daylight. One afternoon, it strolled through a hamlet, ignored the fleeing crowd, and snatched a child from a doorway as his mother watched, frozen with terror. Then came Marie-Jeanne Vallée. On August 11, 1765, she and her sister crossed a stream near Paulhac when the beast burst from the brush. Vallée carried a makeshift spear, a bayonet lashed to a pole, and as jaws opened to engulf her, she drove the steel deep into its chest. Witnesses said the howl that followed was unlike any sound of the wild. The creature fled, leaving a crimson trail. François Antoine, the king's own gun-bearer, investigated. He found Vallée's weapon still slick with blood and tracks unlike any wolf he knew. So impressed was he that he compared her to Joan of Arc. Today, a statue remembers the moment the Maid of Gévaudan wounded the terror armies that could not stop. Antoine himself was 71, yet France's most patient hunter. Where others blundered, he analyzed the creature's routes, its favored times, even the phases of the moon when it struck. By September 21, 1765, he was ready. In the woods near the Abbey of Chazes, Antoine and his nephew confronted an immense wolf, 32 inches at the shoulder, 5 feet 7 from nose to tail, weighing 130 pounds. Antoine fired a musket packed with 5 balls straight into its skull. Survivors were brought to view the carcass. Some pointed to scars they themselves had inflicted, a woman to the wound where her pitchfork had pierced its hide, a boy to the missing toe he'd severed in desperation. Convinced, they proclaimed the nightmare finished. Antoine had the animal stuffed and displayed at Versailles, The king declared victory, showered the hunter with 9,000 livres and a lifelong pension. Yet the calm was short-lived. On December 2nd, scarcely 2 months later, 2 boys near La Bessure-Sainte-Marie were set upon. The elder fought desperately and saved the younger. The beast was hunting again, or perhaps it had never truly been slain, only waiting, cleverer than before, testing the courage of a land already soaked in fear. And if stories like this send a chill down your spine, remember that courage, like that of Portefaix, Valet, and Antoine, begins with simple acts. If you're brave enough to listen this far, be brave enough to click like and subscribe right now, before something else drags you back into the dark. And if you choose not to, at least confess in the comments why you'd rather stay silent while history's shadows keep prowling. After that brief lull, the killings took on a new, unnerving rhythm. The creature no longer lingered when a strike failed. It slipped back into shadow before hunters could even raise their muskets. Open meadows, once favorite ambush sites, were avoided entirely, as though it remembered the bite of Marie-Jeanne Vallet's spear. Yet at court, the king would not hear talk of renewed attacks. To admit them would tarnish the triumph he had already claimed. Editors were quietly warned to stop printing stories from Gévaudan. Officially, the monster was dead. Unofficially, the tally of bodies crept higher. Local magistrates, abandoned by Versailles, grasped for remedies. Etienne Lafont ordered poisoned carcasses scattered through the pastures. The young Marquis d'Apcher mustered civilian patrols, and the people themselves turned to pilgrimages and penitential prayers. The Bishop of Mende declared the scourge a punishment for sin, and whispers spread that God had sent it back because the province's repentance was not enough. Through 1766, the deaths came in fits and starts, the beast warier but just as lethal. Parents discovered their children's remains arranged with disturbing precision. Skulls set apart from torsos, organs displayed as though meant to be read. By the spring of 1767, despair had hardened into weary acceptance. The thing was simply part of life, like famine or plague. Children chanted rhymes about it. Mothers invoked its name to hush unruly toddlers. Even trade adjusted. Shepherds now worked in clusters. Markets shifted to broad daylight, and strangers drew wary eyes in case the beast walked disguised as a man. Then, on June 19, 1767, came Jean Chastel, a 60-year-old farmer and hunter. He had been present since the first hunts and, to some, always seemed a peculiar soul, too intimate with the forest. Years earlier, he had even been jailed for allegedly misleading François Antoine's pursuit. That morning, he joined a party led by the Marquis d'Apcher in the dense woods of Montmouchet. Accounts diverge in detail yet agree on what mattered. Chastel waited in a clearing, prayer book in hand, murmuring litanies to the Virgin. Out of the trees the beast appeared and paused. It neither advanced nor fled. It simply regarded him. Chastel calmly finished his prayer, closed the book, lifted his musket, and fired a single shot. The creature collapsed. An autopsy by Dr. Boulanger of Saugues, notarized by Roch Etienne Marin, recorded grisly contents. The collarbone of a young woman, the femur of a child, scraps of clothing. But there was more, almost buried in the report. The animal bore 42 teeth, the maximum for any canine, set in a pattern unknown to science. Its stomach held not just flesh but signs of human feeding. Cured leather, cooked meat, even traces of bread. Examining the carcass more closely, they noted scars aligned with surgical precision, double dew claws on the hind legs, common in some dogs, never in wild wolves, and faint impressions around the neck as if from a heavy collar. Chastel tried to deliver the trophy to the king, packing it in straw, but summer heat and crude preservation turned it foul by the time he reached Paris. Nobles gagged and fled the chamber. Buffon, the great naturalist, glanced over the rotting form and pronounced it a large wolf, nothing more. The carcass was buried in a private garden, and Chastel was given 72 livres by local officials and sent home in silence. Yet from that day forward, the killings ceased. Not one death after June 19th. A tidy story soon hardened. The Beast of Gévaudan had been a wolf, perhaps two, its savagery inflated by rumor and superstition. Case closed. But the record argues otherwise. The slaughter alone, at least 80 confirmed dead, parish notes pushing past 100, perhaps as many as 124, with 300 maimed, dwarfed normal predation. Over 3 centuries, France counted 9,000 wolf fatalities. This thing eclipsed decades of attacks in only 3 years. Its habits were wrong. Wolves seize easy prey and avoid man unless starving or rabid. Yet here was a hunter choosing people above all, entering villages in daylight, testing tactics against its pursuers. Even its body defied the label. A frame bigger than any European wolf, a black line along reddish fur, an elongated, heavy head, a whip-like tail used as a weapon. Modern theorists still wrestle with it. Biologist Karl-Heinz Take argues the testimony matches a subadult male lion, from the tawny pelt and shadowed stripe young males wear, to the tufted tail and massive leaps. But certainty remains elusive, and while you ponder that unease, decide whether you stand with those who dare face the dark corners of history. Press like, subscribe now before the next shadow slips from the treeline, and if you truly choose not to, leave a comment explaining why. You'd rather turn away while the beast keeps its secrets. Lions, under the right conditions, can sometimes turn man-eaters. Yet how could such a predator have found its way to the quiet hills of rural France? And why did no one at the time recognize it for what it was? Others have pointed toward the striped hyena, citing engravings from the era that labeled the creature a hyen. Its sloping back, massive jaws, and alien presence would have seemed strange and terrifying to peasants. But striped hyenas are not known for stalking people, and the question remains, how would one appear in the French countryside? The theory that has fascinated many historians involves deliberate human influence. Reports described marks along the animal's neck, scars suggesting surgery, and features reminiscent of domestic dogs. It even seemed to acknowledge Jean Chastel, standing still as he raised his gun. Some researchers envision a hybrid bred intentionally, perhaps a wolf crossed with a mastiff, trained to hunt on command. Fragments from its stomach, leather, and prepared meat seem to support the idea. But who could have engineered such a thing, and for what reason? Look at the historical moment. The killings began just after France's humiliating loss in the 7 Years' War, a time when the crown was desperate to restore its prestige. A monstrous threat presented the king with an opportunity to unite the nation, to demonstrate power by eliminating an enemy that no soldier could defeat. When Antoine slew his wolf and the murders went on, officials preferred denial over admitting failure. Some writers speak of political terror, hinting at tensions between Catholics and Huguenots still lingering in isolated valleys. Others wonder if a criminal network invented a monster to mask robberies and drive farmers from their homes. Then there are the strange surgical alterations, which echo the 18th century aristocratic appetite for sensational hunts. Perhaps someone, even within the royal court, bred the ultimate quarry and loosed it in a remote province, only to arrange its death when it caused too much trouble. That would explain why Antoine's wolf was a mere stand-in, why Chastel, a little-known farmer, brought down the real beast, and why the creature seemed to pause, as if recognizing an old master. A rediscovered autopsy by Marin, mislaid until 1952, adds another disturbing note. Its teeth were worn in an unnatural pattern, as though filed, not by chance but to leave more hideous wounds, the signature of something shaped to terrify. The true story will probably never be known. The carcass has vanished, likely buried somewhere in Paris. The witnesses have long since turned to dust. Archives that might once have held the truth were destroyed during the Revolution. All we have are scraps, testimony, and riddles that deepen as they are studied. Yet consider this detail. In 1766, while the beast was officially dead but still attacking, a traveling menagerie toured the south of France with a performing wolf as its star. The showman claimed to have captured and trained it, demonstrating tricks and even staged attacks on stuffed figures. His name has slipped from record, but papers show he left abruptly in early 1767, abandoning his animals. Among them, that very wolf was found lifeless in its cage, bearing surgical scars and marks from a heavy collar, signs eerily familiar. France's government has never admitted any plot or cover-up. The common explanation remains a blend of hysteria and wolf attacks. Yet certain papers in the National Archives remain classified on grounds of historical sensitivity. Why should documents about wolf attacks from over 2 centuries ago still be hidden? One scholar in 2016 claimed to glimpse a letter before officials withdrew it. A note from François Antoine to a Versailles contact, dated October 1765, speaking of a theatrical performance, and a substitute displayed to great effect regarding the original specimen. Soon after, on June 18, 1767, the monster claimed one last victim, 19-year-old Jean Bastide, found in a meadow with her head nearly severed. The next day, Chastel ended the terror with a single shot, as if concluding an arranged drama. Whether it was wolf, hybrid, or something born of calculation, the darkest element is not the beast itself but the knowledge, still hidden somewhere, of exactly what it was. If you found this journey through shadowed history compelling, consider subscribing so you'll be here when we unearth the next forgotten mystery, and share your own thoughts in the comment section about what you believe truly prowled Gévaudan.